Hello, my name is Leonard, and this is the Symantec Enterprise Vault 10 for Exchange Administration course, Lesson 14, Backing Up and Recovering Enterprise Vault. In this lesson, we're going to go through and look at what components are required to back up when you're trying to have a backup strategy for Enterprise Vault. We're also going to go through and look at the different options and strategies that can be applied as part of planning for backups. Then we'll talk about backup mode. This is something in Enterprise Vault that allows you to have access to your vault stores and indexes while you're backing up the particular items. Then we'll get into configuring collection. We've had a couple lessons earlier where we talked about the concept of collection. We're going to go through a little bit more detail about what the collection is doing for us and how to configure it. And then we'll talk a little bit about recovery and a couple different situations and some of the things that you may do to go through and provide a recovery environment when you have that particular situation. So starting off, we're going to go through and look at the components that need to be backed up. Basically, we're starting off first with the SQL databases. As we've gone through the course, you've seen that we've created numerous databases. There's the directory database, there's a vault store database, fingerprint database. Those are all created just to set up your Enterprise Vault. If you are going to have auditing turned on, we talked about that in our monitoring and reporting chapter or lesson. You can have an auditing database, and also if you are using the Enterprise Vault Operations Manager, there's going to be a monitoring database. If you are setting up and using the reports within Enterprise Vault, you'll have a database associated with reporting. And then if you are using those Enterprise Vault add-ons, such as Compliance Accelerator or Discovery Accelerator, they also have their own set of databases as well. You also have the Vault Store partitions. Remember, this is our physical storage of the actual archived items, so we need to make sure we back those up. The indexes, this is all the information that we're searching. These are going to be a series of flat files. So we've got to make sure that we back those items up. There's a bunch of configuration information that doesn't actually exist in the SQL servers, such as web.ini, shortcut.txt. We talked about editing those welcome messages. So if you've edited those, you may want to back them up so you have copies of them. There's also certain accelerator configuration settings that need to be backed up. And you can do shadow copies for the components and their registration within the Windows registry environment. And then also your license keys. You want to make sure that you have backups of your license keys in case you have to do a recovery. You'll have a valid license key available. Also, you want to back up your Exchange server. Just because we're doing archiving way back in Lesson 1, we compared and contrast backing up versus archiving. And we said that even though we are archiving, that does not relieve you of the necessity to still do a backup on your frontline servers. And in this particular case here, we've been dealing with Exchange. So we just show you the mail servers, but that still applies to your file servers, SharePoint servers, whatever you are actually archiving. These things definitely need to be archived. We do kind of have one optional things that could be archived, which is your shopping basket. We talked about in a previous lesson as one of your search tools of being able to do the web browser and based upon being able to collect a group of searches together and recover them or restore them as a group. You may have these shopping baskets available, and you may want to back those up so when if you do have a recovery, those will still be available. But again, they're not actually backing up, or the shopping baskets themselves don't actually contain the items. It just contains the search results, so you could always rerun the searches. So backing them up isn't as a priority as the other items would be. We do have a document a tech note actually, that's available to tell you or give you a listing of all the different things that need to be backed up, and we'll refer to that or point you to that particular tech note when we get to our reference materials at the end of the lesson. So some of the things when we're looking at the minimum requirements for backing up your SQL databases, we recommend that you run a full backup at least once a week. Also, we recommend that you truncate your transaction logs to recover that particular space. You want to run a backup immediately following any Enterprise Vault policy or structural change. Again, there's a lot of configuration information that are stored in the directory database. So if you're making changes to that configuration types of things, you want to make sure you back those up. A lot of our scheduling and a lot of things that happen automatically inside of Enterprise Vault manifest themselves as a SQL Server job. So you want to make sure that you're also backing up within the SQL Server structure the master and the MSDB databases. Also, when we create a Vault Store or a Vault Store group, that's going to generate a Vault Store and a fingerprint database, as well as mentioning the issue of having those additional SQL Server databases that go along with Discovery and Compliance Accelerator. There's actually 2 databases at a minimum for each one of those. and the transaction logs, because again, the transaction logs are going to be what's going to give you that point in time recovery that a backup of SQL Server itself, a full backup, won't be able to necessarily give you, even if you are doing full and incremental backups. Backing up our indexes, the indexes are stored as flat NTFS file systems across many different subdirectories, and we looked at that in our indexing lesson. These particular locations are listed in the indexing service properties of the administration console, and we'll be looking at that again here in a moment as far as how to set and use that for backup mode. Back up the file where these indexes are in backup mode, so you want to make sure you place the indexes in backup mode before you start backing up the files. And an Enterprise Vault site can have multiple indexing services, and we had our indexing lesson that talked about the different configurations of indexing, which means that for these different indexing services, there can be different indexing locations. So make sure you are, in fact, finding all the indexes on all the different indexing servers that you have, and you are backing up all the indexing locations. For backing up the shopping baskets themselves, the shopping basket information is stored as a flat NTFS file across multiple subdirectories. You can see the shopping basket locations from within the shopping service properties of the administration console. Again, this is kind of optional. You really don't have to back this up. The idea of the shopping basket backup is just to give you the ability to be able to have the items that you've already searched for, the list of those items or the results of those searches available for restoration. Again, the original item itself does not exist in the shopping basket, so you haven't lost that. You do want to have the indexes and vault stores in backup mode when you do back up the shopping baskets, if you are going to do that. And there's only one shopping basket location per Enterprise Vault server. Details of backing up your Vault Store partitions. This is to keep the Vault Store synchronized with the Vault Store fingerprint and directory databases. The actual contents of the archives themselves are stored as flat NTFS file systems across many different subdirectories, and we, in the actual Vault Store and partition creation lesson, we looked at the different types of devices we could be storing the archives on, and the one exception that we discussed was the ENC Centera, which uses those content addresses to be able to find those items. But you want to make sure that you know all the individual locations that are associated with the different Vault Store partitions, and you get them all. You do want to have the Vault Stores in backup mode before you start backing up the Vault Store partition files, and that a typical Enterprise Vault server can have multiple Vault Stores with multiple Vault Store partitions. And we also looked at that concept of the journal store. If we're going to have a journal store and a journal archive, that is also important to get backed up. And you want to coordinate the backup of your closed partitions with your storage expiry schedule. So you typically want to run the storage expiry first to make sure that it will delete all the items that are available for the storage expiry to delete, and then that will help reduce the overall size and time that it takes for your backup. And you want to enable collections. The idea of setting up the collections is it'll gather up all these files and put them into cab files, which can help you more efficiently do your backups. So let's look at some different strategies associated with backing up an Enterprise Vault environment. For our SQL Server databases, we have three different types of strategies to consider. Backing up our flat files using a commercially available backup product, as well as if we do have our SQL servers set up in a clustered type of an environment, some options that are available there. For the flat files, you can use the native SQL Server backup within the Microsoft SQL Server product. There is a backup utility built into that. It'll dump all the contents of the databases and the transaction log files into just flat file systems. You could also use the Windows NT backup that comes with the Windows operating system. And for those, either one of those, you could back up to either disk or tape. If you do back up to disk, we recommend that you put it on a different system or at least a different drive so that you're not down or loading up the input-output to the actual drives that are storing the database information as well as the transaction log information. For tape, again, store the tapes in a safe location, preferably offline. If not possible, use a tape vault designed to protect your tape media from physical damage. You can also use commercial backup products that are designed to specifically back up the Microsoft SQL Server server itself. These could include things such as the Symantec Backup Exec and the Symantec Net Backup. These are going to use the application programming interface assigned or provided by Microsoft for working with SQL Server to provide these backups and make sure that all the data as it's being backed up is maintained. And also you can back up to tape or disk using these tools. In a high availability type of an environment where you are running the SQL servers in a cluster type of an environment, you can allow the Enterprise Vault database components to stay online in an event of a hardware or site failure. And we looked at that a little bit in our expanding the environment lesson. It can be configured such that it hosts the Enterprise Vault database at the primary location or on different systems. You can also host a database at a remote location for the purposes of failover. It still can incorporate the backup solutions as they were previously outlined, and the newer versions of the Microsoft SQL Server support various disaster recovery options, which are also sometimes known as log shipping options for disaster recovery of the SQL Server itself and the databases that SQL Server hosts. For the index and store locations, some strategies there. Use snapshots for backing up your Enterprise Vault. This is both for the index and storage volumes. This is to help to decrease the amount of time that you actually spend in backup mode. While you are in backup mode, we will see that the user still can search their archives, but they won't be able to actually write to the archives then. For a Vault Store partition, the backup mode must be set to check for a trigger file. We won't get into the details of that because that's kind of a more advanced concept of why you need to do that. But just from an administrative standpoint, that is a requirement for backing up the Vault stores. For your regular backups that do not include the Enterprise Vault indexes and store backup, you want to exclude from them such things as the index locations, Vault store locations, and the shopping service data. The idea here is that if you can segregate what you're backing up, you can have little windows to back up each thing instead of trying to back up everything associated with Enterprise Vault in one large window type of an environment. And again, Symantec recommends that the system backups for these remote systems exclude the Enterprise Vault data locations or the SQL Server databases. Frequency of backups for the index and store locations. We recommend that you do full backups of these locations. For the active indexes and any open Vault store partition, if feasible, perform the backup daily. At a minimum, you want to do a weekly or monthly full backup, and then maybe a daily incremental backup. If you have a closed Vault store partition, we talked about what a closed Vault store partition was in our storage lesson. And because the Vault store that's closed isn't getting dynamic data updates, it doesn't need to be backed up as frequently. So therefore, you might be able to get away with something like once a month or once a quarter. And you want to make sure that you keep track of your retention category time and your expiry. And you want to try to make sure that the retention period of the backup image is greater than your backup frequency. As we mentioned before, there are some Symantec specific properties that will integrate with Enterprise Vault for backing up all different components that are Enterprise Vault. These include the Symantec Backup Exec and the Symantec Net Backup products. We have an example here of using the Backup Exec agent for Enterprise Vault. It's installed as a separate add-on component for the Backup Exec to basically hook into Enterprise Vault. And it's designed as a multi-purpose agent for purposes of protecting all the critical information that's built into Enterprise Vault. So the Backup Exec agent for Enterprise Vault knows all the different components that make up an Enterprise Vault environment. So therefore, it will provide you with good protection to ensure that you get all those different items and components backed up. This is an example of the Net Backup interface for the Enterprise Vault agent. So with the Net Backup Enterprise Vault agent, it gives you the capability of backing up your storage, your indexes, and your databases. And it shows you kind of a hierarchical view of all the different components that are in Enterprise Vault that could be backed up using the Net Backup program. We kept alluding to earlier when we were talking about the backing up process of the backup mode. So let's go through and look at how we can set the backup mode. Now, another thing, we just got done talking about those agents here a moment ago, the Backup Exec and the Net Backup. They have built into them the ability to automatically set the backup mode, so you don't have to do it manually. So that's another advantage of using those applications. An overview of the backup mode. Backup mode can be set on Vault stores or index locations. While they are in backup mode, there's no data written to the Vault store or the index location. However, all of the services to the user are maintained, which means the users can continue to search and retrieve items from their archives. Backup mode can be set in one or two different ways. You can go through the Enterprise Vault Administration Console, or we have also created PowerShell commandlets that can run in the Enterprise Vault shell to put you into backup mode, and we'll show you examples of doing it both ways. To manage the backup mode, the administrator account must be assigned at least one minimum role. To set the backup mode on vault stores, you must be at least a storage administrator, and to set it on an index location, you must at least have the role of indexing administrator. To set and view the backup mode on a vault store, this is inside the Enterprise Vault Administration Console. It's an excerpt under the Vault Store Groups section for the individual vault stores. It'll show you the listing of all the vault stores in the Vault Store group. You can right-click on a particular vault store, and if it's not in backup mode, it'll give you the option to set the backup mode. If it's already in backup mode, by saying yes in the backup mode column, then you'll get the option to clear the backup mode. So you can manually set it from within the Enterprise Vault Administration Console. On the index locations, you open up the properties of the indexing service that provides the indexes to these index locations, and you go to the Index Location tab, and you have a little option checkbox to place individual indexes into the backup mode. Now, to set it at multiple locations, instead of having to go through and set each individual vault store or set each individual index location, I can go to the vault stores container, right-click on it, and I'll have the option to set the backup mode on all the vault stores in that vault store group, or clear the backup mode for all the vault stores in that vault store group. I can go to the Enterprise Vault server itself, right-click on that, and I can set the backup mode on all the index locations that are on this particular Enterprise Vault server, or clear it. I can go up to the site level and set the backup mode on all the vault stores in the site, or clear it, as well as set the backup mode on all the index locations in the site, or clear it. So again, this gives you the capability of setting them for a whole collection of locations at the same time instead of doing it individually. But notice here, with those two functionalities, you can be as specific for backing up or as generic for backing up these objects as you need to be to set up your background topology. As we mentioned, you can set it up using a PowerShell commandlet. These PowerShell commandlets are set to both set and clear backup mode for the vault stores in the index locations. I can run them directly from the Enterprise Vault Management shell, or I have the capability of running them from a script, and we'll show you how to run them from a script here in a moment. There's 6 PowerShell commandlets for setting and clearing both the index location and the vault store location backup mode, and they're listed there on the slide for you. If you're going to script this, because again, most of the time you're not going to want to sit there and do manual setting of the backup mode and then do manual backups. You're going to automate this as much as you can. You would want the capability to be able to script this in a BAT file. So to run a script, you make a call to the PowerShell.exe program, and that will open up a PowerShell console if you specify PS console switch. You specify the location of the Enterprise Vault Management shell, which is the location of the file evshell.psc1, and then you can use the backup mode syntax that was listed on the previous slide. So they have a couple different examples here, one for setting the vault store backup and specifying the vault store name and the server name, and clearing the index location where you're going to be specifying the Enterprise Vault server and the site name. There is a limitation of this in that you need to make sure that before you try to script running the PowerShell commandlets on an Enterprise Vault server, that you have in fact opened up the Enterprise Vault Management shell at least once prior to trying to run these command shell scripts. Moving on to collection, again, means we're talking about backup. We want to try to minimize the amount of time that it takes to perform backups, and collections is one of the ways that we can do that by combining these multiple larger .dv type of files into a singular cabinet file, which can improve the backup time. The basic process, and we've looked at this process a couple times in previous lessons, so we'll revisit it. Either a send or receive message is stored in the mailbox. That message is then going to be archived based upon the mailbox archiving policy. Once it is archived on the Enterprise Vault server in the Vault Store partition location, it'll be generated as one of the DV file extensions, whether it is a shared or unique part or a sys part, or if it is a collection file. After some period of time of archiving, I can collect those into a cab, and then I can take those cab files and migrate them to an offline after some period of time. And then not only that, but then after a longer period of time, I could even decide that I don't need to have that cab file on the main storage and move it to an offline storage location. If I am going to be doing this collection, this particular collection will be stored in a file hierarchy. And when you're storing the safe sets, the hierarchy goes from the vault store partition name to a file name that represents the year that this item was archived, to a subfolder that represents the month and the day, and then it goes down to the first character in the archive ID, and then it has a folder that has the next 3 characters in the archive ID, and this is where the .dv files will be located. However, the cabinet files, after collection is run, will actually be stored in the first ID folder. So it's the first character of the archive ID folder location. There's going to be rules configured to determine what to select and collect. And if somebody does, in fact, try to access a file that has been collected, I will take it out of the collection and I will create what's called an arch.dv type of a file extension to allow that user access to that item. And what happens there is that the assumption is that they just want to look at it and they won't need it after they look at it that first time. So as part of my collection, I will, after a period of time, go back and delete those arch.dvs types of files. And these cab files can be repacked as they are collected. So how do we define our collection configuration options? Well, this is done on the partition properties. We can do this either when we initially create the partition, which we did look at this a little bit when we were creating partitions back in the storage lesson, or we can go into the individual partition and go to the Collections tab. First, you have to determine whether or not you want to enable collection, and you can do that by putting the check mark there in front of Use Collection Files, and then you can specify what type of collection software you want to use. And typically, if you're talking about an Enterprise Vault environment, you'll select Enterprise Vault for the collection. You can then schedule when the collections will be running during the day. You can also specify the maximum collection file size, which is the maximum size of that cab file. You also can go through and specify the age at which the files will be collected. And you can do that in both days, weeks, months, or even years. So all these are properties associated with the partition that are configurable. Next, we want to look for, so we've got our backup strategy in place. We've done all our backups, and unfortunately, the worst thing happens, something crashes. What types of things can we do to try to recover our Enterprise Vault environment? So basically, one of the things you need to do is you need to make sure that everybody has the correct expectation of how long it would take to recover the different parts of the Enterprise Vault environment. And you should clearly state this in your organization service level agreement, or SLAs. You should structure your backup plan based upon those recovery requirements. And you should select the appropriate recovery procedures based upon your backup strategy that you have, in fact, defined. So preparing for recovery, know how to perform backup and restore functions in your particular application. You should test these out periodically. Don't wait till it actually happens before you run backup. I can't tell you the number of times that I've had people who have religiously done backups, but they never test it. And then, of course, when it crashes, they go and try to do the restore process, and they find out that there is a hole in their backup process. And you need to periodically tune this to make sure, again, that the actual process of backing everything up can occur in a timely manner based upon you configuring collection, based upon when you do your archiving, your expiry, all those types of things. And then also you can tune your recovery to try to make it as expeditious as possible. First, we're going to look at an example of a recovery of an Enterprise Vault using a full system backup. You're going to typically restore the backup of the system. And if for some reason that restoration doesn't put everything back to normal, we did mention back in the Configuring Enterprise Vault lesson that one of the things that you may do with the configuration wizard is use it to repair a improper or not successful recovery. And on the directory server, what you do is you go and run the configuration wizard. And at the prompt, you're going to select that you want to recover the computer, and you will select the no, you want to use an existing remote vault directory. Now, this is recovering your Enterprise Vault environment, not recovering your SQL servers, okay? So the thought process here is that the Enterprise Vault directory database still exists, and all your configuration information about your Enterprise Vault infrastructure is there in that directory database, so it's available. So you specify the name of the directory service computer, and the wizard should be able to find that directory database and do a restoration. This is showing you a screenshot from the Enterprise Vault configuration wizard where we've created a new server. We've installed the Enterprise Vault components, we've recovered from our backup, and we've run the configuration wizard. And you can see that there's a warning that the valid directory database was found. So that means our SQL server didn't crash. So therefore, hopefully, it should be able to go through and say that it's repairing our server, and we will get a pop-up that says that this computer was already found in the directory, needed some repairing, and hopefully it comes back and says that it was successful in performing that repair operation. Now, if you are trying to recover the Enterprise Vault environment, and instead of using the full recovery environment, you're just going to use the data-only backups that you have, you need to install whatever software is missing on the individual servers. You're then going to restore the Enterprise Vault directory database, followed by a restoration of the Vault Store and Fingerprint databases. If you have, in fact, installed the Enterprise Vault Operations Manager, you will restore the monitoring database at this point. If the server names changed as part of the recovery process, you need to go in and modify the domain name server aliases for those servers, and then you need to run the Update Directory Services utility. If necessary, restore any of your indexes or Vault Store partitions to the correct location. Recreate your services and tasks on the directory server computer. Then you can recreate any additional services that are necessary on the other computers. Make sure that all your web access application settings are correct, and if not, restore them from your backup. Check your registry settings and make sure that they're correct. And again, if they're not, you can restore them from the Windows registry backup. Lesson summary here is you identified the Enterprise Vault components that must be backed up, the options and strategies for performing those particular backups. We also went through and looked at what backup mode did and how we can set the backup mode on the Vault stores and the index locations, as well as configuring the collections to help improve the backup times. We also looked at some different strategies for recovering your Enterprise Vault infrastructure. Our reference materials include the Administrative Console Help, the Symantec Enterprise Vault Administrator's Guide, Installing and Configuring Guide, as well as if you are using NetBackup as your recovery agent, there is a Enterprise Vault Agent Administrator's Guide. And then we mentioned the SQL Server's Administrator's Companion. This gets into issues about the SQL Server restoration. And then we have the technical article that gives you the overall items that need to be backed up and overall backup strategies. And that brings us to the end of this lesson.